What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We are headed over to Lars Lindstrom's house right now to pick up the all-new 2025 CRF450R. Honda was kind enough to lend me one. Lars lives in the area, so Lars offered to bring it home and let me pick it up locally. Pretty stoked, really excited about this new chassis. I'm excited to see what it has to offer. I feel like every time Honda drops a new bike, there's a lot of hype around it, and I'm excited to share the first review, first ride with you guys. I got invited to the press launch at Ironman a couple weeks ago, but I couldn't make it, so they were kind enough to hand one off to me out here in Southern California. And unfortunately, it looks like the press launch got rained out quite a bit, so not a lot of guys got a lot of laps in on them. So I'm pretty stoked. I'm gonna take it out to Glen Helen. I feel like that's a national caliber track for a proper test and a proper review. So I'm excited to share that with you guys, get some feedback on it, and we're gonna pull up to Lars's house here in just a minute and see what he has to say about the new bike. Dude, there she is. Factory setup, but what can you tell us about it?
Compared to last year, there's a bunch of changes, and especially when you look at the frame, it doesn't look that much different except for this piece right here, because the subframe mounts to this piece, which is a big cast piece, which is more rigid, instead of being on the frame up here.
I was saying, like, compared to all the other models that drop, like, I feel like it's like an updated version of the last chassis. Like every year Honda drops something, it's like a complete, like, drastic change. This is like just like another step in the right direction of the last chassis.
Basically, like, you know, like all the patches and stuff that you've seen. Have you seen that on our race bike?
No.
There's like patches up here in the front end and some other spots too that you can't see, and it's all based off the direction of this bike.
Oh, okay.
So they were developing this bike and then like feeding us stuff and going, hey, try this. Just like, hey, this worked for us. What do you guys think? And then so we went through a couple different revisions of that, and it is like we're not allowed to take anything away, but you can add.
Yeah.
The boys rode like this prototype bike a couple of years ago. Other than the shroud and the side panel, it doesn't look physically a lot different, but it's so much different in like the way that the whole bike bends and twists. You know, you got so much heat for stability, right? And like and just like the nervous feeling in the
Trey
front.
said calm was the one word that described it.
Yeah, it is. It's a good word to describe it for sure. And I think the suspension settings are way better. That's what I think. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Like it'll be fun.
All right, sweet. Well, we can't wait to rip it.
Yeah.
What's going on, guys? I'm out here at Glen Helen Raceway testing out the all-new CRF450R. Wanted to come out here because there's a lot of acceleration chop, a lot of braking bumps, obviously a lot of elevation, and I feel like we needed to come out to a national caliber track to really get a good feel for this bike. Excited to kind of see how it stacks up against the previous models and get a good test for this thing and feel our first impressions, and I'm excited to share with you guys how I feel about the bike and answer some of the questions that you wrote to me on Instagram. All right, so first impression, bike is amazing. I'm really blown away with how comfortable it was right off the bat. I didn't change anything with suspension, didn't even set sag. I just put gas in it and checked my tire pressure, and that was it. I wanted to get a real raw feeling for how this bike handles right out of the showroom floor. I think that they did a really good thing by not trying to reinvent the entire bike. In past years, like 2009, 2017, we saw huge changes. As soon as you saw the bike, you recognize that it was a completely different chassis, different suspension, and there's no parts that are even remotely close to the previous generation to those ones. This just feels like they took what they learned in the last chassis, made some changes, made some upgrades, and they're all in the right direction. So I'm very happy with the way this thing was right out of the gate. So I asked you guys what you wanted me to pay attention to and some of the topics that I should go over when I was out on the track. It seemed like everybody kind of had the same questions. The biggest one, how does the front end feel? I think it feels night and day better, drastically better than it was last year and especially the previous years. It feels like they added some rigidity to the triple clamps and the forks. It gives you more of a consistent feel. It doesn't feel like you're getting weird flex spots where you might be hitting a bump and on a different lap you're getting different flex throughout the clamp or the fork or something like that. It feels like it's putting all that input directly into the suspension itself. Felt a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident entering turns. Moving on to the back of the bike, the rear end on the Hondas has always kind of been something that I've been really nitpicky about. Going back to 17, there was a lot of squat and a lot of issues with acceleration chatter, rear grip, something that it kind of struggled with as a stock platform, and then as soon as you started making upgrades to it, it was kind of tricky even then to dial it in. So I'm very happy to say this felt really good accelerating, coming out of turns, even with curbs and loose dirt and all that kind of stuff that's really hard to judge and really hard to feel confident going over. I felt like I knew exactly what the bike was gonna do. I felt like I could hammer on the throttle, be a little bit more aggressive, especially in stock form on this bike. I was very, very happy with the suspension, and just the chassis overall felt like it was taken like the 2021 platform and then just upgraded. Stiffened, just a little more rigid, but in all the right areas. The clamps and suspension in the front feel great. Shock and new linkage system feels awesome. I think they learned a lot over the years with what wasn't working. We had a lot of issues with squat, or as they called it, anti-squat, and it was a very, very big issue on the Hondas. So I'm glad they redesigned the linkage. Feels amazing. Traction is a big, big thing for me. Consistency, and I felt like in all those categories, this thing outshined the previous model by a long shot. Honestly, one of the best handling bikes. I'm very picky with my suspension. It was the best handling bike I've ridden right out of the box. Bone stock. I was very, very impressed with this suspension. So comparing this to the 24 model, one thing that I always do when I get a new bike, I throw a bigger sprocket on the rear, adding one tooth for a little more bottom end. I feel like this didn't need it. I could have ran this sprocket just fine, had plenty of punch off the bottom, and it pulled forever. I know that they didn't make very many upgrades to the engine. I think it might actually be the same exact engine that came in the last model, but they did change the air box, and I know that was a hot topic also of kind of where the air filter is located, how easy it is to access. From what I understand, it's more of a direct shot to the fuel injection system. You can definitely feel it's a lot more snappy. I did mess with the map modes quite a bit. I did like the standard map mode. I think it's map 1 is just the kind of between smooth and aggressive. I felt like out here, it really shined. I even liked it on the smooth one. I didn't like it on the aggressive one. Glen Helen is typically known to be a pretty loose track. A lot of the berms kind of blow out. Felt like it was a little too aggressive, so I was happy with map 1 and smooth. It is very nice to have the accessibility when you show up to a track. You feel like you need more, maybe the dirt's a little deeper. You can go to aggressive setting. It's like here where it's a little slick. If you're not comfortable on that standard map, you can turn it down a little bit, get a little bit more traction, and kind of get a little more feedback from the rear tire. Mapping is awesome. Like on a track like this, like I said, slippery, not a lot of traction. If I was going out there to hammer a fast lap, I'd probably leave it in that number 1 setting. If I was gonna go out there and do a 20-minute moto, a 30-minute moto, I'd probably want a little less power, a little more rideability on the track like this. It was deeper. If we're at a track like High Point or something like that, where the track's gonna weigh the bike down, weigh the power down a lot, I would definitely put it up into that aggressive map setting. And I just love that that's right at your fingertips. If you want to try it out in practice, you can kind of mess around with it, feel what's comfortable for you. I think that's something that kind of was taken down from the factory settings, where we had a lot of adjustability, and on the fly we had a switch on the bar where I could go from an aggressive to a soft setting. I think that for the everyday consumer, I don't understand why it never showed up on these bikes, but it's a good thing they're finally here, because it's a great little tool, great little thing to have that's just a push of a button and your bike feels a little bit different. Overall though, bike's amazing, chassis is great, suspension's really good, did feel extremely comfortable. Even at Glen Helen, where lines do blow out quite a bit, there's a variety of riders out here, a lot of lines changing up every single lap. Every time you come around, the turn's different, and I felt like coming into a turn, I could look ahead, spot where the line was gonna kind of fall apart on me, and I felt comfortable enough to dive in. I'd say that this bike makes me feel a lot more confident, a lot more comfortable, and just the overall feel is great. All right, so wrapping up, there isn't much I'd change on this bike. If I was gonna hang on to it for a long time, I'd get the suspension tuned for myself. Wouldn't take much, honestly. I probably wouldn't have to do an A-kit or anything like that. I could just get the springs resprung from my weight, maybe do a little bit of valving here and there, but I'm very, very happy with this as stock. Really would be happy with it. If I couldn't change it for months, I'd be fine with it. Things that I would change, adding to that list, I would change the grips. Haven't ridden in a while, so got some baby hands now. I need some donuts and some grips. Glad to know that they put a 33 on the front, because that's my favorite tire. Love that tire. I felt like that also added to that front end kind of wishy-washy knifing feeling. I think the updated clamps, forks, and the tire itself knocked this thing out of the park. So I want to thank the guys over at Honda. Thank you guys for tuning in and asking questions. Very happy to take this thing for a spin. I hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next one.